I spent 4 years on the manifestation roller coaster before I figured out what was actually going wrong. The techniques worked sometimes, then they didn't, then they did again. No pattern I could see. I could do sats perfectly. I understood revision. I had manifestations that worked beautifully, then others that never appeared, and some that appeared then just evaporated. Here's what I finally discovered. I was building my desired state for 1 hour every night and dismantling it in the other 23 hours without realizing it. The technique wasn't broken. My state management between practice sessions was destroying everything I built during practice. The problem isn't your visualization skills or how long you practice. It's what happens to your consciousness in the minutes after you wake up, during conversations, when you react to circumstances, the dozens of moments throughout each day when you unconsciously slip back into being the person you were. Tonight, I'm going to show you the 4 specific mistakes that reset your state between practice sessions and why managing these micro transitions matters more than perfecting your technique. Let me show you the 4 mistakes that even advanced students make. These aren't beginner mistakes. These are the mistakes you make after you already understand the techniques, after you can visualize clearly, after you know how to revise. The mistakes that keep your manifestations inconsistent even when you know what you're doing. The first mistake is what I call the morning reset. You spend 20 minutes doing assets perfectly. You fall asleep in the wish fulfilled. You wake up 7 hours later, and within 3 minutes, you've undone everything you built the night before. This happens automatically. Most people don't even notice it's happening. Here's a pattern I've watched repeat with student after student. Someone who has been practicing sats for 6 months. They understand the technique. They can feel themselves in the desired state during practice. But every morning, the moment their eyes open, their mind immediately starts running the old program. They check their phone, they see bills in their email, they remember their current circumstances. They start thinking from their current situation instead of from their desired outcome. Within minutes, they're back to being the person they were the night before. But there's one specific signal that tells you whether your morning state has already shifted back to the old identity. And most people miss this signal completely. I'll show you exactly what to watch for in a moment. Because without recognizing this signal, you'll never know if your state maintenance is actually working or if you're just cycling through the same patterns. Neville taught this principle directly. In his teachings from 1948, he said that consciousness sleeps in man, not the other way around. Wrong assumption here. Consciousness only shifts during major life events. It shifts constantly. Every time you wake from physical sleep, you're making a choice. You're either waking up as the person you were, or you're waking up as the person you're becoming. Most people make that choice unconsciously. The morning transition is critical because your consciousness is fluid when you first wake up. It hasn't hardened into the day's patterns yet. You have maybe 3 minutes before your mind locks back into automatic mode. If you waste those 3 minutes, you've essentially reset your entire assumption back to defaults. Think about it. You spend 20 minutes building a state at night, then you spend 3 minutes unconsciously dismantling it in the morning. Which one do you think wins? But even if you master the morning transition, there's a second mistake that happens dozens of times throughout your day. Unconscious reactions to circumstances. Every single time you react to external events from your old state, you're awakening back into the person you used to be. This is where most people lose their manifestation without realizing it. Take someone who's manifesting a better financial situation. They do their assets perfectly. They fall asleep feeling wealthy. They even manage the morning transition correctly. Then at lunch, they check their bank account and their stomach drops. They feel that familiar anxiety about money. They start calculating how they're going to pay next month's bills. In that moment, they've abandoned their assumption completely. They're thinking, feeling, and reacting from lack, not abundance. Or they're manifesting a relationship. They visualize their ideal partner every night. They feel loved during their practice. Then during the day, they see a happy couple and feel jealous. They scroll through social media and feel lonely. They go to dinner with friends and complain about being single. Every one of these reactions is pulling them back into the state of someone who doesn't have what they want. I'll be honest about something. Most LOA teachers will tell you to raise your vibration when this happens. They're wrong. Here's why. Neville didn't teach vibration management, he taught state transitions. When you react to circumstances from your old state, you haven't dropped your vibration. You've awakened into a different identity. You can't fix an identity problem with a mood adjustment. You need to consciously choose which person you're going to be in that moment. The person who has what they want doesn't get anxious about bank accounts, they don't feel jealous of couples. They don't complain about being single, not because they're forcing positive emotions, but because that anxiety literally doesn't exist in their state of consciousness. This connects to something Neville taught throughout his lectures during the 1950s. He said that to be awake is to be conscious of what you are thinking and feeling. Most people sleep through their reactions. They react automatically to circumstances without realizing they're making a choice. Every reaction either strengthens your assumption or contradicts it. There's no neutral ground. Here's the signal I mentioned earlier. The moment you feel that familiar emotional response to circumstances, that anxiety, that frustration, that longing, that's your consciousness telling you it has slipped back into the old identity. The signal isn't subtle. It's the exact opposite of how you would feel if you already had what you want. When you catch that signal, you have about 30 seconds before the state hardens. That 30-second window is your opportunity to consciously choose your response from your desired state instead. The third mistake is subtler, but just as damaging to your state. Unmanaged inner conversations. Students monitor their inner dialogue during practice, but let it run wild during unmanaged hours. Your inner conversation is running constantly. It's either supporting your desired state or undermining it. I've seen this exact mistake in person after person. They'll spend 20 minutes visualizing their dream job. They'll feel confident and successful during practice. Then the next day they're stuck in traffic and their inner dialogue goes, I hate my commute. I'm so tired of this job. When is something going to change? They don't realize they just spent 15 minutes in the car contradicting everything they built the night before. Now here's the counterintuitive part. Most people think they need to monitor every single thought throughout the day. That's impossible, and it's not what Neville taught. There's a specific technique for managing inner conversations that Neville used himself, but it's been stripped out of every modern course because teachers don't understand how it actually works. I'm going to show you that technique next, because it's the difference between exhausting yourself trying to control every thought and having a simple system that runs automatically, or they're working on self-concept. They do such seeing themselves as confident and worthy. Then throughout the day, their inner conversation runs commentary like, I'm so awkward, I always say the wrong thing, nobody takes me seriously. They're having two completely different inner conversations, one during practice and one during life. The live conversation always wins because it runs longer. The way revision is usually taught is backwards. Most teachers present it as a technique for changing traumatic memories or major past events. Neville didn't teach it that way. Here's the actual sequence. Revision is daily maintenance for catching the moments when your inner conversation contradicted your assumption. Every time you catch yourself thinking from your old state, that moment needs revision. You rewrite that inner conversation from your desired state instead. It's not therapy for your past, it's quality control for your present consciousness. Here's the technique I promised you. Instead of trying to monitor every thought, Neville taught something he called the watchful eye. You set three specific anchor points during your day. I suggest 10 a.m., 2 p.m., and 6 p.m. At each anchor point, you ask yourself one question. What has my inner conversation been for the last hour? Not every single thought, but the general theme. If the theme contradicted your assumption, you revise that entire hour in 30 seconds. You replay the inner conversation from your desired state. This catches 90% of the contradictory thinking without the exhaustion of constant monitoring. If you want to go deeper on this, I've put together a complete state architecture diagnostic in the description below. It's free, link in the description. Now the fourth mistake This one took me embarrassingly long to figure out. Treating assumption as a ritual instead of an identity. Students think they can do assumption for 20 minutes and then live normally for the rest of the day. They compartmentalize their practice. They have their spiritual time and then their regular time. This completely misses what Neville was teaching. In his teachings from 1952, Neville said you must persist in the assumption that you are what you want to be, not during practice, not during meditation, continuously. The assumption has to be maintained across all activities, during conversations, during work, during problems, during ordinary daily life. Actually, let me give you the context first. Most people treat such like a ritual they perform, rather than rehearsal for a new identity. They think the 20 minutes of visualization is the manifestation work. Wrong. The 20 minutes is preparation. The actual work is living from that state for the remaining hours of your day. Before I give you the application protocol, there's one thing about what I call your baseline state, what your consciousness defaults to when you're not actively managing it, that determines whether any of these techniques actually stick long term. I'm going to address that now because it's what separates people who see results in 2 weeks from people who practice for years with minimal change. Neville often used the analogy of an actor staying in character. If an actor breaks character between scenes, the performance fails. You can manifest from one identity during practice and then live from a different identity during your daily life. The manifestation requires sustained embodiment of your desired state. Mirrored, here's what this looked like for me personally. I was trying to manifest a specific business outcome. I would do sats perfectly. I could see it. I could feel it. I was disciplined about my practice. But during the day, I would have conversations with friends where I complained about my current situation. I would make decisions from my current circumstances instead of from my desired outcome. I would worry and strategize and try to figure out how to make things happen. I was living as two different people, the person I was becoming at night and the person I was during the day. The breakthrough came when I realized that assumption isn't something you do, it's something you are. You don't do wealthy, you are wealthy. You don't do confident, you are confident. And if you are something, it affects how you think, feel, and act across all situations, not just during designated practice time. Your baseline state is what your consciousness reverts to when external pressure hits, when someone challenges you, when bills arrive, when plans fall through. If your baseline state is still the old identity, then no matter how perfect your SAT sessions are, you'll keep snapping back to the person you used to be under pressure. Here's the test. What's your first internal response when something goes wrong? That response reveals your true baseline state, not your practice state. If you've been doing SATs for months without consistent results, the problem isn't the technique. The problem is state fragmentation. You're building one identity during practice and living from a completely different identity the rest of the time. Your consciousness doesn't know which person you actually are. The manifestation gets confused signals. These four mistakes all point to the same deeper pattern. Successful manifestation isn't about perfect technique. It's about maintaining state consistency across the micro transitions throughout your entire day. Neville taught that man is always awakening from one state into another. This doesn't just happen during sleep, it happens dozens of times throughout your waking hours. Every time your mood shifts, that's a state transition. Every time you react to circumstances, that's a state transition. Every time you have a conversation, that's a potential state transition. Every time you encounter a trigger or a stressor, that's a state transition. Most people experience these transitions unconsciously. They wake up in their desired state and then spend the day unconsciously transitioning back to their old state through dozens of small choices. Think of it this way. Your consciousness is like a radio dial. During SATs, you tune into the frequency of your desired state. But if you don't actively maintain that frequency, the dial drifts. External circumstances try to retune you to your old frequency. Inner conversations try to retune you. Reactions try to retune you. Unmanaged emotions try to retune you. If you're not consciously maintaining your chosen frequency, you'll drift back to the default station. Here's exactly what to do starting tonight. First, you're going to create what I call state anchor points throughout your day. These are specific moments when you consciously check what frequency you're tuned into. Set free alarms on your phone, not for meditation, not for visualization, just for consciousness check ins. When the alarm goes off, ask yourself one question. Am I thinking from my desired state right now or from my current circumstances? Second, you're going to implement what I call the 3-minute morning protocol. Remember when I mentioned the morning reset a moment ago? This is where that becomes practical. The moment you wake up, before you check your phone, before you think about your day, you're going to spend 3 minutes consciously choosing your identity for the day. Not visualization, not thoughts, just a simple internal statement. Today I am the person who already has what I want. Let that settle into your consciousness before you engage with external input. Third, you're going to use revision as daily maintenance, not just trauma healing. Every evening, you're going to review your day and identify the moments when you reacted from your old state. Did you worry about money? Did you complain about your job? Did you feel jealous or insecure or frustrated? Revise each of those moments. Replay them with you responding from your desired state instead. Fourth, you're going to practice what Neville called living in the end during ordinary activities. When you make decisions, make them as the person who already has what you want. When you have conversations, have them as that person. When problems arise, respond as that person. This isn't acting as if, this is recognizing that you are already that person in consciousness, and consciousness is the only reality. You and I are no different. Whatever I figured out, you can figure out faster because I'm telling you the gap directly. I spent 4 years cycling between success and failure before I understood that the technique was never the problem. The unmanaged hours between practice sessions were the problem. Let me show you what I mean here. The technique itself takes 1 hour of your day. What happens in your daily consciousness determines whether your state compounds or completely evaporates. The actual gap lives in those unmanaged hours. That's where your manifestation is won or lost. Everything we've covered addresses that gap. The morning reset, the unconscious reactions, the unmanaged inner conversations, treating assumption as ritual instead of identity. These are all state maintenance issues, not technique issues. You probably already know how to visualize. You probably already understand SATs. What you need is a complete system for maintaining your chosen state across the transitions and triggers and ordinary moments that make up the majority of your life. The reason your manifestations keep disappearing isn't that you're doing SATs wrong. It's that you're building your desired state for 1 hour and unconsciously dismantling it across those other hours. Every morning reset, every unconscious reaction to circumstances, every unmanaged inner conversation, every moment you treat assumption as ritual instead of identity. These are all state breaks that reset you back to your old identity. The technique works perfectly. Your state maintenance between sessions is what needs attention. That's the gap. When I had this same realization myself in year 4 of practicing Neville's work, here's what I found. I'd been on what I call the manifestation roller coaster for 4 years. The technique worked sometimes, then it didn't, then it did again, no pattern I could see. I knew SATs, I understood revision, I could visualize clearly, but my results were maddeningly inconsistent. Then I noticed what was happening between practice sessions, not during. My self talk reverted, my reactions reverted. The morning trap destroyed entire nights of work. I was building state in 1 hour and dismantling it in the remaining hours. I started tracking my consciousness across full days. Time-stamped journal entries, 2 years of pattern mapping. That became the protocol I now call state architecture. That's exactly why I built the source code diagnostic. It walks you through where your specific gap lives across the hours between practice sessions. You probably already know the techniques. You don't need more technique. You need a complete system for maintaining state across the full day. It's the protocol I wish someone had given me in year 1. It's free, Link in the description below. Try this tonight. After your SAT session, set 3 alarms for tomorrow. When each one goes off, ask yourself one question. Am I thinking from my desired state right now or from my current circumstances? That simple check will show you exactly where your state breaks down. Neville said in his teachings from 1952, "You must persist in the assumption that you are what you want to be." He meant persist across all hours, not just the moment of practice. The techniques aren't broken. Your state architecture just needs attention. If this resonated, I'll see you in the next one.